Hi, it's Ian here. Welcome to another 5-minute marketing tip. This week's tip is about how to find people willing, happy to pay for premium pricing. I'll show you a method for analysing your market and figuring that out after this break. Hi, welcome back. Got an email from Anna this week replying to an email I sent out talking about premium pricing and how when you're looking for premium pricing, usually the best thing to do is not to try to appeal to the whole market and persuade them that they should be paying premium prices for your products and services. It's to identify a sub-segment of the market that is willing to pay premium prices and gear up your products and your services and your marketing for them, rather than gearing it up for the whole wider market, who inevitably isn't. Most of them aren't willing to pay premium prices. So Anna wrote back and said, that sounds great in theory, but how do you go about doing that? So really, it's a two-step method for doing that. The first is to brainstorm various different segments and sub-segments. So what are the segments there? The second step is to analyse those segments and sub-segments and to figure out which ones are the premium priced ones. So in terms of brainstorming, there are sub-segments within every market. You just have to go through an exercise of kind of thinking what they are. So if you do presentation skills training, for example, that's a reasonable market. Lots of people operate in that market. Most people in that market tend to do presentation skills training for pretty much anyone. But you could segment that market down. You can do presentation skills for training for men or for women. You can do presentation skills training for older people who maybe want to get their experience across, or younger people who maybe have a credibility issue when presenting. You can do presentation skills training for business people who want to do training seminars and things. You could do it for senior executives who have to present to their investors. You could do presentation skills training for students who have to present as part of presenting a project or a case that they've worked on. You do presentation skills training for people who have to work on present very technical material, or people who want to present emotionally to really motivate and move people with their presentations. You do presentation skills training for people who want to speak on big stages, or people who want to speak at kind of small events and seminars. Or you can do presentation skills training for people who want to present on video or on webinars, kind of emerging trend these days. So there are all sorts of different sub-segments that you could focus on. The question is, which one of those is going to be or which ones of those are going to be premium segments? So that's where the second step of the analysis comes in. Now, I'm assuming here that two things. One is that whatever subsegments you identify, you have a particular skill or expertise or experience that makes your services valuable to that subsegment. So if you're thinking of presentation skills for executives presenting to investors, if you've got no experience of delivering that service at all, then clearly that's not a subsegment you can go into without a lot of preparation, maybe doing some pro bono work to get the experience, etc. So I'm assuming you've got the experience and the skills to do it, and I'm also assuming that you're interested in it, you have a passion and energy about that particular segment, otherwise you'll get bored and move on. So assuming that's the case, a couple of questions to ask yourself about that sub-segment. First of all, is it big enough and can I reach it with my marketing? That's a kind of viability question. Most of those types of segments I've talked about so far are easily big enough in any market. But if you look at something like the one about presentation skills for senior executives presenting to investors, it's typically only very large companies that do that. So that is a limited market. It's big enough in most countries. And if you were doing face-to-face presentation skills training in most big cities, it would probably be big enough. But, if you do live somewhere obscure and it's difficult to travel to a big city, that might not be viable for you because it's just not, you just can't reach enough of those potential clients. That aside, and that usually shouldn't be an issue for most subsegments, the big questions about whether the segment is going to be a premium segment are as follows. Firstly, you have to think, does this sub-segment get tremendous value? Which ones get the most value from my services, from what it is I deliver? And I'm not talking in a relative sense, I'm talking in an absolute sense here, and you have to be a bit ruthless. So for example, students presenting the results of a project they've been working on, that's valuable to them to get those presentation skills, but students are not a very lucrative segment. They're not kind of flush with money, as it were, whereas senior executives who have to present to investors, they get a tremendous amount of value from that because it's worth a fortune to them and their businesses for investors in their company to have a good impression of the business. So that's a very lucrative segment because it's worth a lot of money to the people who get that training on the assumption it works, and therefore they would be prepared to pay a decent amount of money for it. Second question to ask yourself is it a growing market segment. So I like growing segments because although you can make money in pretty much any segment, even if it's kind of flat or in relatively, a slight decline, in a growing segment, there's usually a lot of money sloshing around. Usually people are short of time, so they want to hire outside help. And usually suppliers who can work with that segment are kind of in short supply because the segment is growing. You need more and more people able to supply it. And that means you can charge premium prices because there simply are less of you able to meet that demand. So is it a growing segment? So for example, presentation skills for people needing to present on video or webinar, that's a growing segment because that's an increasing trend. That might be something you would look at if that was your area. Next question is this area close to the jugular? And what I mean by that is it an area of strategic importance to the business or individual? So it might be, high value financially, you think, but most businesses, most people have a few areas of their lives or their business that they really prioritize and they really invest in, the areas I call being close to the jugular. If you're a pharmaceutical company, for example, you tend to care most about R&D and sales and marketing, all the stuff about HR and distribution, etc. Yeah, you need to do something there, but your real investments tend to be made in R&D and marketing. So if you're doing presentation skills training, presenting R&D results, that might be a good one, or presentation skills for salespeople, presenting complex technical material to doctors. That would be high value because those are the two areas that are close to the jugular for pharmaceutical companies. And similarly with any business or any individual, there are a couple of areas that are really important to them strategically. Those will be the ones they'll be willing to invest in. Finally, do the clients in that particular subsegment recognize that they have a need? Sometimes it's easy for us to think it's obvious that they need this particular service from us, but do they recognize it themselves? Are they calling out for help in this area? If they're not, it's going to be difficult to charge premium pricing because they just don't realize how important the issue is to them. So that's the methodology. Brainstorm the different subsegments. That's relatively easy. You just let your brain run a bit free on that. Use some of the examples that I gave earlier for inspiration. Then secondly, analyze those segments. Make sure it's big enough. Make sure, probably the most important question, does that subsegment get a tremendous amount of value? Is there a kind of no-brainer return on investment from them for them in terms of investing in your services? Is it a growing subsegment? That's ideal. Is it close to the jugular? Is it strategically important to them? And do they recognize that they have a need? If you can get a positive to most of those questions, then it should be a premium priced segment and it's well worth going for. See you next week.